Hello, fellow YouTube viewers. This is Nicholas from Sterling Night Gamers. Now, recently, AMC has just concluded the first season of the new show Preacher, and I wanted to give you all my thoughts on the series so far. Now, in case any of you did not know, Preacher was adapted from a comic book that was made by Garth Ennis, and yes, that Garth Ennis. The comic book was about Texan preacher Jesse Custer, who is endowed with the Word of God. Think Kilgrave from Jessica Jones, except this preacher uses that power for good. Now, the comic book was dark, it was blasphemous, and it was offensive to so many people, and I loved it. Preacher is one of my favorite comic books of all time, right along with Watchmen and Empowered. I love the comic book for its black comedy, brilliant dialogue, and likable, complex characters. Though not a direct adaptation, it was a spiritual adaptation of the comic book. The tone, the comedy, the themes, it got right. The TV show is not a direct adaptation of the comic book, but that's probably for the best. Even though that I love the comic book series, I'll admit a lot of the jokes are a little bit dated, and it had a lot of gay jokes that wouldn't sit well today compared to the late 90s. But honestly, I'm surprised that this show was even made to begin with. I mean, this thing has been in development hell since the start of the new millennium. It's a miracle that this thing got made. Now for the characters, Cooper as Jesse Custer fits to a T. Gilgun as Cassidy fits to a T. Now, Ruth Negga as Tulip, they did a different route with Tulip when compared to the comic book. I mean, besides changing her ethnicity, which I am perfectly okay with, Ruth Negga is such a lovely actress, I am perfectly okay with how they changed her character. In the comic book, Tulip, besides being Caucasian, was a hit woman but was so out of situation. Here, Tulip, she is a straight-up criminal. She is not afraid to get her hands dirty for what she wants. One thing that I do have to credit the showrunners for how she's portrayed, there's one thing that I noticed that wives in dramas tend to stop the lead characters from doing something cool. Tulip, however, in Preacher, she is the exact opposite. She wants Jesse to give up being a preacher and come back to a life of crime, and she's constantly trying to convince him, trying to seduce him. She wants Jesse back simply because she loves him and feels that being a preacher is not healthy for him, to make himself the moral center of a town that is inherently corrupt. Oh yeah, by the way, mascot of the comic book series, Arseface, played perfectly. The moment he came on screen and saw Ian perform with that heavy makeup, I clapped my hands. I said to myself, that's Arseface. It is like they pulled him straight from the comic book and put him right on the screen. He was Arseface. A new character was added in named Emily Wardrobe, played by Lucy Griffins. Completely new. I don't think she's based off of anybody in the comic book. She was Jesse Custer's number one. She helped balance the checkbook for the church and played the organ, helped organize events. At first it felt a little bit unnecessary, but she was the polar opposite of Tulip. Tulip was trying to get Jesse back to a life of crime. Emily was trying to keep Custer as a preacher. Now, she was not a bad addition. If anything, she challenged Jesse and challenged the other characters. So, she was a good addition. Now, for as much as I praise the show, it does have just one glaring problem. And just one. The thing is, this show has the characters done right, has the themes and tone done right. The writing is fantastic, the dialogue is great, but what holds it back is actually the directing. This season drags on. Seriously, the entire first season takes place in the small town of Annville, while in the comic book, it was a road trip adventure. Basically, Jesse, Cassidy, and Tula travel all over the world trying to find God. The entire first season is in Annville, and only Annville. Nowhere else. And it just drags on. you're just begging for some progress to happen, but very little happens. Because the thing is, by the end of the season, we're not even the first third of the first volume of the comic. The cinematography is off sometimes. The pacing is a bit all over the place. To the point where my brother couldn't stand watching this show anymore. I mean, I kept on watching this show simply because I love the comics. The show has some peaks and valleys, and sometimes they happen. So best thing I can recommend to you is if you have read the comic book, see this show. You'll enjoy it. If you haven't read the comic book, please be patient. Because overall, I still enjoyed this show, and it left on such a high note. Except this one moment that I won't spoil, but it just ruined the episode for me. I won't give you details, but you'll know what it is when you see it. But I would say with the amount of heat that adaptations have been getting lately, I would say that this was a good adaptation. It remained faithful to the themes while also updating it and putting new takes on characters and events. So go watch this show. Maybe you'll enjoy it more than I did. Thank you, take care, and good night.